Hi everyone who's going to watch this video. This is my first time recording with PowerPoint. I gotta say it looks pretty cool. Let's see how it goes. So let's talk about my book, which is Researching Children's Experience: Approaches and Methods by Green and Hogan. This book is available, well, not right now because I have it, but it's available at the Kent State main library, and we can borrow it for like a couple of months. That's the book from the library. This is the content. If you need to pause it to look at some right now, something that might interest you specifically, I'm gonna talk about the ones that called my attention the most and have to do more with our mini study, but also maybe mention some of other chapters that might be interesting for you and your focus the study. Okay, so for me, these were three particular subjects that were interesting, which are methods and methodological issues, ethical considerations. Particularly ethical, for some reason I really want to, well, not for some reason, I really want to be ethical with conducting research with children. Of course, we have to be very ethical, but particularly I really want to be ethical. So I'm like, this chapter, I need it. Exploring meaning in children interviews, because it's been a long time since I've been a child, since we've been a child, so it's important to explore how they construct meaning, because even though we were children before, we think very differently now, and this book confirms it. And about creative methodologies in participatory research. I'm interested in participatory research and in creative methodologies because I think a lot can come out of something more than an interview. Even though an interview is very useful, there are other resources, and children are so complex that varying our methods can be very productive and interesting. Okay, so something that I found in the book overall, or where I focused, are the complexities of conducting research on children. Because on one hand, we have to recognize their agency. Yes, they are minors, they are developing, they are growing, but it's still them who make sense of their experiences, even though we as adults influence a lot of those experiences. In the end, it's them making sense of them. Also challenges in overemphasizing their difference with adults. So yes, we have to acknowledge that we are different. There's a power imbalance, etc., because there is. But if we over focus on that, we're gonna struggle. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Sorry, I don't want to redo that. Because if we focus so much on that, we're gonna struggle seeing them as agents. So this is me kind of like making sense of what children are on research. We can see them as vulnerable agents, because at the same time they're agents, but we have to be mindful. Okay, yes, and our perception to what they think or need may differ. Sorry, our perception of what they think or need may differ to what children say. We might think we know what they're going to answer, what they feel. Truth is, we don't, and we have to have that in mind before assuming about children in research. Also, children's rights are evolving. They've been increasingly participating more in research and acting as co-researchers. Okay, so a little bit more on that. Sorry, my cat just came in. I had to kick him out. Yes, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Child. So according to this declaration, the authors, Green and Hogan, of this book, they say, okay, so their rights is for them, if we're going to accomplish that, then we're going to value their perspectives, and it's their right to be heard and their voices to be projected. So for them, they support on this Declaration of Rights to say, actually children need to be researchers. They need for us to do research on them and with them. Yes, vindication of children rights. So this is them verbatim. Obligation to assist children to express their perspectives and views on matters important to them. So they're interpreting this as an obligation. The importance of children's opinions and subjective engagement with the world. Only them can tell us how they see the world. We cannot assume. We might have a good guess, we might have a very far guess, but that's why we have to talk to them and let them talk. Okay, so this is something that I found interesting in the book, that is, they said that for most children, if you ask them like what color is heavier, red or yellow, they will have an answer for some reason, even though the question doesn't make sense. Professor Damro did have an answer, and she said red. But still, it's a question that doesn't like scientifically make a lot of sense, at least for the common adult. But most of the children will have an answer. One reason might be because they have a very creative mind, and they will have a very creative answer of why one color is heavier than the other, even though it's just maybe the probably very similar weight at least. But they're very creative, and they'll find an answer to whatever crazy question you ask. Or they will have always a desire to please, so they will not dare to tell you, I don't know, or that question doesn't make sense, or they might just be playing and just say something or just guess. But I think it's interesting to put things into perspective and think about what questions do kids think make sense and what they don't, or is it because they want to be liked by an adult, etc. And then again, there's an issue on, not an issue, but a situation on power, which we cannot ignore. The adult is in a position of higher power than a child, mostly in an interview, focus group, creativity scenario. So we must have that in mind. Children would find it difficult, we talked about this before, will find it difficult to disagree with adults, most of them, but also maybe some of them the other way around, they just want to disagree and they'll make it difficult, or they maybe say the opposite of what they would say. That could be too. They're very vulnerable to persuasion, and they'll have a desire to please this stranger. How about this stranger that is asking me questions, that is being nice? They want to please them and not disagree, etc. And that's why the book also focuses on how important it is to what is this called, like make rapport, like for the interviewer to try to connect with the child, and we'll talk about this later, like really explain what is going on, but because it might be the first time they're in a situation like this, so the more comfortable they will feel, the more easier they'll talk about their experiences without restrictions. So the child as a researcher is becoming more of a phenomenon. Children asked to be co-researchers. Children's role as researcher can take a number of forms, so let's look at that. So the authors put it like this: the child as a researcher participation may look like they might conduct interviews from schedules developed by adults. They might be involved in developing the research questions and schedules. They help determine issues to be researched. They participate in analyzing and presenting findings, and then decide on action to be taken. So this is kind of like it goes up the engagement and participant of the child, and then of course it's the researcher. It's the researcher's choice how much they want the children to be involved, but there is definitely some opportunities for them to be involved in the research. And according to that continuum we just watched, and still on child as a researcher and participation, the authors say the Social Legal Studies Association proposes that ideally research participants should have the opportunity to see and comment on interview transcripts and conclusions, because I see that in a way they are owners of their voice and what they said and their experience. So they should be entitled to look back into that. And in that case, referring to the book, why should children be an exception to this, unless there's like a real reason that it should not be a good idea. But it's also worth considering that children reflect on their how they support the research they participated in. And going along with that, there's informed consent. Now that I'm trying to get the IRB permit, there's the informed consent for the parent, but there's something else that is the child assent, where the child is able to like in simple words it explain to them what the research would be like. And I have the form here. Okay, so this is an example of the child assent from Kent State. We can find it on the Kent State website. They have all of the forms, but you can see how it's in a more simpler language. Hi, my name is, I would like to, do you want to do this? Do you have any questions? If you want to stop. Even though it's simple language, it's basically saying what the consent form for adults says, but in a way that is understandable in order to make it more fair and respect the child's time and their will. In the end, will be their parents, but it's also worth it for them to have all of this information. And moving on with consent and choice, the book talks about giving respect to children's sense of and control, because they have this right and we should respect their control as human beings. Understand the project, what is going on, just like the child assent is trying to do. Let's not forget, and I keep adding like in the back of my head, don't forget to ask for questions, because they might have questions and they might not yet dare to ask, or they have comments or suggestions. Just to remember that to have fun. And I think that, well, if they're having fun, they're gonna be the most honest and the most cooperative. So that will be interesting to try for them to have fun as well. And address all their queries and concerns. Really try to dig up if they have a question. Do you have questions? Their time is valuable. They have a schedule. They go to school. They have homework. They need time to play. So researchers should be thankful, very thankful, that the children is lending their time for them. Then there's also a segment on compensation. If adults in the same study are receiving compensation, why doesn't the child? I'm also guilty of this. I think about my research in the future with children and how I'll be thankful to the families, and I do want to offer some compensation, but then what about the child? Of course, you'll have to discuss it first with the gatekeepers, but again, it's their time and it's worth giving them compensation. If we are planning on giving compensation, the kid is the primary resource, so let's not forget about giving some compensation to the kids if we are giving to the families. It's worth considering. presence of others or gatekeepers during our interview, during our focus group or activity. Gatekeepers present during data is being collected. So this is it's up to the research design. Um, it might go both ways. I think and the book says it depends. It depends on the child. It might make the participant more secure, and it might help them to be more confident and talkative. But then on the other hand, for some other participants, let's say teenagers, just to generalize teenagers, they would prefer to have a more private interview situation. So it would depend. Something that they consider as very relevant considerations for children, research with children, are welfare, where there's some benefit for them, for example, directly or indirectly, through increasing adults' understanding of children so that their interactions are more sensitive. So that can be as a long-term or a future welfare in general to the children population. Protection, research on children should avoid stress and distress. Provision, children should, whenever possible, feel good about having contributed to research. I think this one is very important to try to accomplish. They all are, but this one is, I like that one. Choice and participation, as we were talking about before with the assent. Children should make informed choices about the following: agreement or refusal, opting out, determining boundaries, and actually being participatory and contributing to the research. And then the book has a section on the making meaning of children, and they mentioned that they're also making sense of this probably the first time or not. It's one of the few times that they've been in this situation where this adult comes and asks questions about their thoughts, about their experience. So we also have to let them process what is going on. Children to be asked about their opinion is not the most common dynamic, so that's also something they have to make sense of, which might be a little strange for them since they're used to just being told what to do. Children should be given the opportunity to explain their responses, and I think there's a lot of that, because if they say something that we don't understand, we can try for them to deepen that answer, like, oh, what do you mean, instead of but I think by asking that, we can get a lot of insight if we ask for more details. Clarification is an opportunity to understand the children's meaning making. Exactly. Okay, the adult agenda. This was me exaggerating a little bit, but kind of not, because during interviews, meanings must be constructed intersubjectively. Just like we said before, if we're not really understanding what the participant child is trying to say, let's try to make it sense with our wording, with our own vocabulary, see if they understand and we are on the same page. So it's a constant negotiation and renegotiation of meaning. We have to keep in mind that we are not discovering or uncovering characteristics or competences of the child. We're building knowledge together. We're not there to judge or to be, oh, this is competent or incompetent for an interview. This is a process, and they're making meaning, and their experience is very, very valid, and their experience is there. Some of the strategies they recommended were asking open-ended questions where they can talk more and explain, of course, and this is with adults too, unless we're doing quantitative. Avoid closed questions, yes or no. No suggestive questions, that I think also applies to adults. Not trying to give them a hint of what to answer, or to answer like what we want for them to answer. They said, I think this was interesting, avoid repeating questions in the same way, because apparently if you ask the same question again, exactly the same, they're gonna change their answer because they might think that somehow the answer they gave before was wrong, so they're gonna change it. That was interesting. Don't interrupt the child and accept silences. Children's language should not be taken for granted. And then they talked about creative methodologies in participatory research with children, because they stated that sometimes interviews is not enough to uncover some of their experiences or rough experiences, and they come out a little easier through creative methods. They used inventive and imaginative processes with stories, games, drama, but this was mostly when analyzing children in a community and not necessarily as the individual, or that's how I understood. But it's still resources very interesting that I think if we can adapt them maybe for the data collecting of individual children. And finally, because sorry, this is longer than it should be, other interesting chapters that might call your attention. There's researching the child in developmental psychology, and I think it puts the contrast with other types of psychology, anthropological and sociological perspectives, naturalistic observations of children and their families, which they highlight how important it is how the kid interacts with their parents, with their peers, like with their equals. Sorry, I mean siblings if they have. How they make meaning of what the other means, how the other person feels. Ethnographical research in children, discourse analysis, narrative analysis, phenomenological, and focus groups. So if you want to check that out, it's in the library and it's a very interesting book. Thank you.